Have you ever looked at a sign and realized that one tiny sentence could destroy your entire plan? Imagine spending hours getting ready, choosing the perfect swimsuit, fixing your makeup, practicing your walk, building enough confidence to finally enjoy a beautiful beach day, only to stop in your tracks because of 5 simple words. Beach badge allowed girls only. Most people would turn around immediately. But what happened next completely changed the way I think about confidence, passing, and what it really means to be accepted. Stay with me because this story isn't just about getting onto a beach. It's about the mistakes almost every crossdresser makes, the lessons nobody teaches, and the surprising truth I learned that day. And believe me, the ending was nothing like I expected. The morning started perfectly. The weather was warm, the sky was bright blue, and for the first time in weeks, I actually felt confident enough to spend an entire day presenting as myself. I had carefully packed everything the night before. My swimsuit matched my cover-up perfectly. My sandals were comfortable but still feminine. My beach bag had sunscreen, sunglasses, a towel, water, and just enough makeup for quick touch-ups. Everything felt planned. Everything felt right. As I drove toward the beach, I kept looking in the mirror, checking my lipstick, making sure my hair was still sitting naturally. If you've ever gone out dressed, you already know that feeling. It isn't vanity. It's survival. You're constantly asking yourself the same questions. Is my wig straight? Is my foundation blending correctly? Is my voice relaxed? Are people staring? Do I look natural? Every traffic light becomes another opportunity to double-check yourself. By the time I parked, I had convinced myself that today would be different. Today I wouldn't spend the whole day worrying about what everyone else thought. Today I would simply enjoy the beach like everyone else. Walking toward the entrance felt amazing. Families were laughing. Kids were carrying colorful buckets. Friends were taking selfies. Couples were holding hands. Nobody seemed to care about anyone else. That alone gave me confidence. Then I saw the sign. Beach badge allowed girls only. I stopped walking. My heart instantly started racing. What exactly did that mean? Was it talking about a section reserved for women? Was it referring to a special beach event? Or was it simply a rule that would expose me the second I reached the entrance? Suddenly, every confident thought disappeared. Instead of enjoying the beach, I found myself overthinking every possible outcome. What if the staff asked for identification? What if someone questioned me in front of everyone? What if I embarrassed myself? What if I embarrassed other crossdressers who simply wanted to enjoy their day peacefully? These thoughts happen incredibly fast. To people who have never dressed in public, it probably sounds dramatic. But anyone who has ever stepped outside wearing clothes that finally match who they feel inside understands exactly how quickly confidence can disappear. Fear doesn't usually arrive with a loud voice. It whispers. It tells you everyone is looking. It tells you you're about to be judged. It tells you to leave before anything bad happens. And the strange thing is that fear usually sounds reasonable. I stood there pretending to check my phone while secretly watching other people enter. Women walked in without hesitation. Men walked in with their families. Nobody was being questioned. Still, I couldn't move. That's when I realized something important. The biggest obstacle wasn't the security guard. It wasn't the sign. It wasn't the people. It was the conversation happening inside my own head. Sometimes we reject ourselves long before anyone else gets the chance. I finally took a deep breath and started walking again. Every step felt heavier than the last. The entrance got closer. The security guard smiled at each guest. He scanned their beach badges. He greeted everyone politely. Nothing unusual. When my turn arrived, I smiled back as naturally as I could. "Good morning." "Morning," he replied with a smile. He looked at my badge for less than 2 seconds. "Enjoy your day." That was it. No interrogation. No suspicious looks. No awkward questions. Just 3 simple words. Enjoy your day. I almost laughed at myself as I walked away. The entire nightmare had existed only inside my imagination. But before you think the lesson ends there, something happened just a few minutes later that taught me an even bigger lesson. I found a quiet place near the water and spread my towel across the sand. For the first time all morning, I relaxed. The sound of the waves made everything feel peaceful. I took off my cover-up, adjusted my swimsuit, and finally allowed myself to enjoy the sunshine. Then I noticed a group of women sitting nearby. Immediately, my confidence dropped again. Not because they had done anything wrong, simply because I assumed they were analyzing me. It's amazing how powerful assumptions can be. One woman looked in my direction. My brain instantly translated that into, "She knows." Another smiled. Instead of accepting the smile, I wondered whether she was secretly laughing. One whispered something to her friend. I automatically believed they were talking about me. Here's the dangerous part. None of those thoughts were based on facts. They were stories I created. Crossdressers often become experts at reading expressions that don't actually exist. We interpret neutral faces as judgment. Normal conversations become secret criticism. Ordinary glances become proof that everyone knows. The truth is that most people are thinking about themselves. They're worried about their own appearance, their own family, their own plans, their own lives. We imagine ourselves as the center of everyone's attention, when in reality most strangers barely notice us for more than a few seconds. About 20 minutes later, something happened that completely destroyed every assumption I had made. One of those women walked directly toward me. Every nervous thought returned instantly. This was it. This was the confrontation I had imagined all morning. My heart started pounding again. She stopped beside my towel. She smiled warmly. Then she asked the last question I expected. "Excuse me, would you mind taking a picture of us together? We keep cutting someone's head off." For a second, I just stared at her. Out of every possible conversation I had imagined, that wasn't even on the list. She handed me her phone with complete trust, smiled, thanked me afterward, and walked back to her friends. That tiny interaction lasted less than a minute, but it completely changed my mindset. The fear I had been carrying wasn't coming from other people. It was coming from me. And once I understood that, the rest of the day became something I never thought possible. The moment she walked away, I realized I had been holding my breath without even noticing. I smiled to myself, shook my head, and looked out at the ocean. Isn't it strange how our minds can create an entire disaster that never actually happens? For weeks I had imagined every possible embarrassing situation. I had rehearsed answers in my head. I had planned escape routes. I had even decided which parking lot I would run back to if something went wrong. Yet the first real interaction of the day wasn't rejection, it was trust. That single moment taught me something that took years to understand. Passing isn't just about makeup, clothes, or voice. Confidence changes the way people respond to you. That doesn't mean confidence magically solves every problem, but nervous energy often attracts more attention than appearance ever does. When you're constantly checking if everyone is watching, your body language tells a story before you even speak. I started paying attention to the women around me, not to compare myself, but to observe something I had never noticed before. They weren't perfect. One woman's hair was messy from the wind. Another kept adjusting the straps of her swimsuit. Someone else had smeared sunscreen across her nose, without realizing it. A few complained about how they looked in photos. One laughed because she forgot to shave her legs before coming to the beach. That surprised me. For so long, I had imagined that every woman around me was effortlessly confident, effortlessly feminine, effortlessly perfect. Reality was completely different. They had insecurities too. They adjusted their clothes. They checked mirrors. They worried about photos. They laughed at themselves. Suddenly, femininity didn't seem like a perfect performance. It looked human. That realization removed so much pressure from my shoulders. One mistake I see many new crossdressers make is believing they have to be flawless before going outside. They think their makeup must be professional. Their wig must never move. Their walk has to look exactly like a fashion model. Their voice has to sound perfect every second. Here's the truth nobody told me. Perfection looks suspicious. Natural people aren't perfect. Real women don't spend every second posing. They scratch their nose. They fix their hair. They laugh loudly. They trip over sandals. They get sunscreen in their eyes. They spill drinks. They forget things. They look different from every angle. The more I tried to imitate perfection, the more uncomfortable I became. The more I allowed myself to simply exist, the easier everything felt. After sitting on the beach for a while, I decided to walk along the shoreline. It seemed simple enough, but walking on sand in women's sandals is very different from walking on a smooth sidewalk. Within minutes, I realized my graceful walk had completely disappeared. I nearly twisted my ankle. I stumbled once, then twice. Finally, a little wave hit my feet and I almost dropped my sunglasses into the water. A couple nearby laughed. For half a second, my old fear returned. They're laughing at me. Then I looked again. The husband had just been knocked over by a wave. His wife was laughing at him, not me. I laughed too. That became another lesson. Your brain often assumes you're the main character in everyone else's story. You're usually not. People are busy living their own lives. As I continued walking, I noticed another crossdresser in the distance. I couldn't be completely sure, but something about the posture, the styling, and the careful way they carried themselves reminded me of myself years earlier. They kept looking down, avoiding eye contact, walking quickly, trying to become invisible. I remembered exactly what that felt like. I considered saying hello, but I also knew not everyone wants to be approached. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is simply let someone enjoy their day without making them feel noticed. As we passed each other, we exchanged a brief smile. Nothing more, but that smile said everything. It said, "You're okay." It said, "You're not alone." It said, "Enjoy your day." Sometimes that's all another person needs. Around lunchtime, I joined the line at a small beach snack stand. It wasn't a fancy place, just burgers, fries, cold drinks, and ice cream. The line moved slowly, giving me plenty of time to overthink once again. What if I have to speak? What if my voice gives me away? What if the cashier looks confused? Voice is something almost every crossdresser worries about. Ironically, nervousness usually changes your voice more than anything else. When you're tense, your throat tightens. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your words come out forced. By the time I reached the counter, I reminded myself of one simple rule. Slow down. Smile. Speak naturally. I ordered a bottle of water, fries, and a chicken sandwich. The cashier smiled. "Anything else?" "No, thank you. That'll be $23. I paid. She handed me my food. "Enjoy." Again, just another completely normal conversation. The more ordinary I allowed the interaction to be, the more ordinary it became. That afternoon, I watched people arriving at the beach, and something interesting happened. Without even trying, I began noticing confidence levels instead of appearances. Some of the most beautiful people looked uncomfortable. Some people with average looks carried themselves like they owned the world. Confidence wasn't about looking perfect. It was about feeling comfortable enough to stop apologizing for existing. I wish someone had explained that to me years ago, because for the longest time, I thought confidence came after acceptance. Now I believe the opposite is often true. People respond to the energy you bring with you. If you constantly expect rejection, you'll interpret almost everything as rejection. If you allow yourself to relax, you'll notice something surprising. Most interactions are simply normal. Not amazing. Not terrible. Just normal. And that's actually a beautiful thing. Later that afternoon, while sitting near the water again, I overheard two teenage girls talking behind me. One of them said, "She's really pretty." My heart skipped. Were they talking about me? I refused to turn around. Then the second girl replied, "No, the girl with the yellow hat." I smiled to myself. A few months earlier, I would have convinced myself they were secretly talking about me. Now I understood something important. Not every conversation is about you. Not every glance is about you. Not every laugh is about you. Learning that might be one of the most freeing experiences any crossdresser can have. As the sun slowly began moving lower in the sky, I realized something that shocked me. For almost 2 hours, I hadn't thought about whether I was passing. I had simply been enjoying the beach. That had never happened before. And what happened just before I left became the memory I still think about whenever fear tries to convince me to stay home. As the afternoon slowly faded into evening, the beach began to change. Families packed their umbrellas. Children, exhausted from building sandcastles all day, were falling asleep on their parents' shoulders. The loud energy of the afternoon was replaced by the peaceful sound of waves and distant conversations. The golden sunlight reflected across the water, making everything look softer, calmer, almost unreal. I sat there watching the horizon, realizing I had been at the beach for nearly 6 hours. 6 hours. Not hiding, not running, not constantly checking every reflection. Just living. That might not sound like a huge achievement to someone who has never struggled with confidence, but for me it felt enormous. Then I started thinking about all the opportunities one had missed over the years because fear made my decisions. How many invitations had I declined? How many beautiful places had I avoided? How many memories had I never created because I convinced myself something bad would happen? Fear is strange. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it politely tells you to stay home. It tells you today isn't the right day. Maybe next week. Maybe after you lose weight. Maybe after you buy a better wig. Maybe after you perfect your makeup. Maybe after your voice improves. Maybe after you become more confident. The problem is that maybe can quietly steal years from your life. I know people who have spent thousands of dollars on clothes they'll never wear outside. Drawers full of beautiful dresses. Closets filled with heels. Boxes of wigs. Expensive makeup collections. Everything waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect moment never comes. At some point, you have to decide that your life is happening now. Not someday. Not when you're perfect. Now. As I packed my towel into my beach bag, I noticed the same security guard standing near the exit. The same one I had been terrified of only hours earlier. This time, instead of avoiding eye contact, I smiled naturally as I walked toward him. He recognized me immediately. "Leaving already?" he asked. I laughed. "I've been here all day." He smiled. "Looks like you picked the best weather." I definitely did. "Have a safe trip home." "You too." That was the entire conversation. Think about that for a second. The person I feared the most at the beginning of the day became one of the most ordinary conversations I had. Our imagination is incredibly creative. Unfortunately, it often creates problems that reality never does. Walking back to my car, I passed the sign one more time. Beach badge allowed girls only. This time I looked at it differently. Earlier that morning, I had seen it as a warning. Now I saw it as something else entirely. The sign hadn't changed. I had. Sometimes the obstacle isn't the situation. It's the story we attach to it. I sat in my car for several minutes before starting the engine. Not because I was nervous. Because I didn't want the day to end. I looked at myself in the mirror. My hair was slightly messy from the ocean breeze. Most of my lipstick had faded. My mascara wasn't as perfect as it had been that morning. There was sand everywhere. I looked less polished than when I arrived. Ironically, I felt more beautiful, not because of how I looked, because of how I felt. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't measuring my worth by whether I passed. I was measuring my day by whether I enjoyed it. That's a completely different way of living. If you're watching this and you're new to crossdressing, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. Don't let fear become your full-time stylist. Don't let anxiety choose your destination. Don't spend years preparing for a life you're too scared to live. Take your time. Stay safe. Know your surroundings. Respect local laws and private spaces. But don't confuse preparation with endless postponement. There will always be another excuse to wait. Confidence isn't something that suddenly appears one morning. It's built one ordinary experience at a time. One trip to the grocery store. One walk through the park. One coffee shop visit. One conversation. One smile. One successful day that proves your fears weren't as powerful as they seemed. And even if something awkward happens, you'll survive it. Everyone has awkward moments. Women do. Men do. Everyone does. Being embarrassed for 30 seconds is far better than regretting 30 years of missed opportunities. Looking back now, the funniest part of the entire story isn't the sign. It isn't the security guard. It isn't the women asking me to take their picture. The funniest part is realizing I almost turned around before any of those moments had the chance to happen. Imagine if I had listened to fear. I would have driven home believing the world had rejected me, when in reality, The world had been ready to welcome me all along. That single day changed more than my confidence. It changed the questions I asked myself. Instead of asking, "What if something goes wrong?" I started asking, "What if today becomes one of my favorite memories?" That one question has taken me to places I never imagined I'd visit. Every beach, every cafe, every shopping trip, every little adventure started with exactly the same feeling: nervousness. The difference is that I stopped treating nervousness as a stop sign. I started treating it as proof that I was growing. If you've ever stood in front of your mirror wondering whether you're good enough to step outside, if you've ever changed outfits 10 times before giving up, if you've ever sat in your parked car and driven home without getting out, if you've ever believed everyone would judge you, please remember this. Your imagination has never met the people you're afraid of. It creates characters that don't exist. Reality is often much kinder than fear allows you to believe. That beach didn't teach me how to look more feminine. It taught me something much more valuable. Real confidence isn't pretending you're never afraid. Real confidence is walking forward even when you are. And every single step you take despite that fear becomes proof that you're stronger than the voice telling you to turn back. Sometimes the biggest victory isn't being seen as someone else. Sometimes the biggest victory is finally allowing yourself to be seen as yourself. That's the lesson I carried home from that beach. Not the sign, not the badge, not the sand. Just one simple truth. The prison door had never been locked. I was the one holding it closed. The moment I finally let go, I discovered the world outside was far bigger, far kinder, and far more beautiful than fear had ever allowed me to imagine. The drive home was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every red light gave me another chance to replay the day from beginning to end. I kept asking myself the same question. What actually happened today? Was it really the beach that changed me, or was it finally seeing how many of my fears had never been real in the first place? When I got home, I unpacked my beach bag the same way I always did. I shook the sand out of my towel, placed my sunglasses back in their case, and hung my swimsuit to dry. Normally, after a day out, I would immediately start analyzing every tiny mistake. Did someone stare too long? Did my makeup hold up? Did my wig shift? Did my voice sound convincing enough? This time, none of those questions came to mind. Instead, I smiled because I remembered laughing. That was unusual. For years, going out dressed had felt like an exam. Every trip outside was something I had to pass. Every stranger felt like a judge. Every public place became a test of whether I belonged. But beaches don't hand out report cards. Neither do grocery stores. Neither do coffee shops. The only person grading me had always been myself. The next morning, I received a message from another crossdresser I had known online for several years. We had exchanged makeup tips, talked about outfits, and shared stories about confidence, but we had never actually met. The message simply said, "Did you end up going to the beach yesterday?" I smiled. I did. Were people okay with it? I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. That question used to be the most important one in my mind. Now I realized it was the wrong question. I replied, "The better question is, was I okay with myself?" There was a long pause before another message appeared. I've never thought about it that way. Neither had I. Most crossdressers spend years trying to control what strangers think. You can't. You never will. But you can control whether one random opinion ruins your entire day. That's a skill. And like every skill, it improves with practice. A week later, I decided to visit another public place dressed exactly how I wanted. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I no longer wanted fear making my decisions. Something interesting happened. The second outing felt easier than the first. The third felt easier than the second. The fifth felt almost normal. Confidence isn't built through reading advice online. It's built through collecting evidence. Every positive experience becomes evidence against fear. Every normal conversation becomes proof that the world isn't always waiting to reject you. Every smile from a stranger weakens the story's anxiety keeps telling. Of course, not every experience is perfect. Let's be honest about that. Sometimes people stare. Sometimes someone whispers. Sometimes you'll meet someone rude. That happens to everyone. Women experience it. Men experience it. People of every background experience uncomfortable moments in public. The mistake is believing one unpleasant interaction represents the entire world. It doesn't. One rainy day doesn't mean the sun never comes back. One rude person doesn't represent humanity. One awkward moment doesn't erase 100 good ones. I wish social media showed more ordinary experiences. Most videos online only show two extremes. Either everything is perfect or everything becomes dramatic. Reality usually lives somewhere in the middle. Most days are wonderfully uneventful. You buy your coffee. You walk around. You smile at someone. You enjoy yourself. Then you go home. Those ordinary days may not go viral online, but they're the moments that quietly build confidence. Several months after my beach trip, I decided to go back to the exact same place. Not because I needed to face another challenge, because I genuinely wanted another relaxing day. That alone told me how much I had changed. As I approached the entrance again, I saw the familiar sign. This time I didn't stop. I didn't overthink it. I didn't rehearse conversations. I simply kept walking. The same security booth stood there. Different employee. Same process. He scanned my badge. Smiled. Have fun. 3 seconds. That was it. I almost laughed. Months earlier, I had allowed those few seconds to control my emotions for an entire morning. Now they barely registered. Growth is funny like that. The things that once kept you awake at night eventually become stories you tell with a smile. While walking along the beach that afternoon, I noticed someone standing exactly where I had stood during my first visit. They weren't moving. They kept looking at the entrance, looking down, checking their appearance, taking one step forward, then stopping again. I recognized that body language immediately. Fear. I didn't know their story. Maybe they were a crossdresser. Maybe they were transgender. Maybe they were simply nervous about wearing a swimsuit. It didn't matter. I understood that feeling. As I walked past, our eyes met for just a second. I smiled. Not a big dramatic smile. Just a simple one that quietly said, "You're going to be okay." They smiled back. Then, a few moments later, I noticed they finally started walking toward the entrance. Maybe my smile helped. Maybe it didn't. But kindness costs nothing. Sometimes a stranger's calm energy is enough to remind someone that they're safe. That's something our community can always offer each other. Not pressure. Not competition. Not comparison. Support. Because the truth is, there will always be someone with better makeup. Someone with better fashion. Someone with a more natural voice. Someone who passes more easily. If your happiness depends on being the most convincing person in the room, you'll never relax. Instead, ask yourself a different question. Did I enjoy today more than yesterday? If the answer is yes, you're already winning. Looking back now, that little sign at the beach wasn't the biggest challenge I faced. It was simply the spark that exposed something much bigger. Fear had been writing my story for years. That day, I finally picked up the pen myself. And from that moment on, every new adventure felt less like a test and more like a life I had finally given myself permission to live. I walked past that same sign one last time before leaving. Beach badge allowed girls only. The funny thing was the sign never changed. The beach never changed. The people never changed. The only thing that changed was me. And sometimes, that's the biggest adventure any of us will ever have.